Ready to go?
Should be all set.
Welcome, everyone, to meeting number 7 of our AI task force. Again, task force members and technical advisors should be showing up as panelists in the Zoom. If you aren't, please get in touch with Scott and Dan, who can promote you. The meeting is being recorded. You can access recordings of prior meetings on the AI task force website via the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future. Today, we will focus on our meeting on exploring how AI can be leveraged to transform the way that governments deliver public services, and particularly how they could be delivered in Maine. And we have some really outstanding speakers for you. First up, we're joined by representatives from the city of Corona, California, who have been experimenting with using AI to speed up housing permitting and production. And they'll be talking through their process and showing us a live demo of their permitting tool, which is exciting. Next, we'll take a deep dive into Maine's municipalities, and Sarah Curran from GOPIF will facilitate a panel discussion about how AI is showing up at the local level. Brian McDonald from the Maine Municipal Association, Sandra Fournier from the town of Mapleton, and Jay Brenchick from the city of Auburn will talk through some of the challenges and opportunities that are unique to AI's use in local government. And then we'll hear from two folks who are thinking about AI's usage at the state level. Nick Marquis, Maine's CIO and technical advisor to the task force, will run us through the steps that Maine's Office of Information Technology is already taking to prepare the state to use AI tools. And then we'll turn it over to Commissioner Robert Asaro Angelo from New Jersey's Department of Labor and Workforce Development. And this is an opportunity to hear from a state further ahead on AI deployment. Then we'll take a short break and return for plenty of time for discussion and hope to round everything out by 2 p.m. So that's the run through of today's events. And so let's move over to get started. I'd like to welcome Chris McMasters and Kyle Edgework from the city of Corona, California. Coming out of our last meeting, we got feedback about starting with a demo, something a little bit more tangible that we could sink our teeth into. So we wanted to do that again. We could have picked a bunch of different areas, but we asked the staff to find an example that spoke directly to a policy issue that would resonate with every community in Maine. And housing certainly was at the top of that list. So Chris and Kyle are wrestling with many of those same questions in Corona, and they've generously offered to spend some time demoing their tool for us this afternoon. I'll ask you guys, Chris and Kyle, to start by introducing yourselves and then spending a few minutes teeing up your project. What problem were you really trying to solve and how you've got about tackling it? And then we've planned about 10 minutes for your demonstration, and hopefully there'll be time for 1 or 2 questions after that that I'll help facilitate. So I'll turn it over to you, Chris, to start and then to introduce Kyle and move ahead with that.
Sounds good. All right.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting us. So I'm Chris McMasters. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Corona. Did the private sector as a CIO for roughly 17 years, and then I've been in government for probably the last 10 years. So it's been a pretty diverse portfolio of things I've gotten to work with. In AI, we've been using this particular product and working with this startup for, oh gosh, almost a year at this point now in development. And we've been through pilot. Let's introduce himself really quickly.
And I'm Kyle Edgeworth. I'm the Deputy CIO for the city. Been with the city for almost 9 years now. And before that, like Chris, I was in the private sector for about 10 years as well. My main tasks are managing the day-to-day operations for the city in IT's functions.
All right. So this is kind of how this whole thing started. If you don't know, California has a housing issue problem. So, and part of that problem is the processes to getting permits and going through the planning process is relatively tedious. It's hard to hire people on that side. We lose our plan checkers quite frequently. And we just have a lot of rules and regulations and code that we have to go through. So it's an arduous sort of climb to it. And it causes a lot of frustration, both on the staffing side, but also on the citizen side, for us. So for some time, we've been looking for some type of tools to help us. We've digitized a lot, so using project docs and those sorts of things to try to improve efficiencies. But what really happens is, right, people get into plan check or they get into, planning and code, and it's just a back and forth that occurs. And there could be inconsistency because it's human beings checking over things. And so I think the issue at hand was like, how can we improve that? How can we make it better? I think with the advent of AI, AI is really good at following rules, frankly. And when we started looking in the space, there was literally no one who did it. We were searching kind of up and down for it. About a year ago at ICMA, our city manager was there. We were there giving a presentation actually on AI. And there happened to be a vendor, a startup that was just trying to figure out on the West Coast, if they could build something out here. They had built something on the East Coast a little bit, and really the CEO of that particular company, he was just a citizen who had submitted some plans for a building, and he was so frustrated that it took him 3 months to kind of get through the first preliminary part of the process. And he felt like there has to be a better way. So he had some people on his team, and they tried to create this AI, and they were looking for sort of a West Coast representative. And so when we met up with him, we said, we will be that person. We want to try this out. And so we contracted with them, which, if you've ever worked with a startup, there's a lot of leeway in that, especially when you're helping build something new. And so we partnered with them, and it took us, it's taken us about 6 months to really get it off the ground and working into some pilot form. And today we're basically at that portion where it's ready for production and where we're using it already. So Kyle's going to kind of walk through the demo component of this, and then we'll answer some questions, talk kind of about what it does, and then kind of where we're going with it as well. I think that'll be interesting to you. One of the things that we find, though, I will tell you right out of the gate, and this is because we're particularly IT people, I had to learn a lot about planning and construction and all those sorts of things. There's two sort of pieces to the puzzle, right? There's the internal piece of how we process things, and we follow rules, and we try not to have errors, right, going through it. But we also have, during submission, people do impartial submissions, right? That's very common, and that slows the entire process down. So we try to gate it with this product so that we get those sort of missing components out of the gate, so we can fire it right back. And in the future, we're looking at actually putting applets so that developers and people can download those applets and then use it against their submission before they even submit. So we get a clean submission coming out of the gate, which then improves our process, rather, makes it more efficient and correct. So anyway, with that, I will leave it to Kyle, and he will guide you through some of the demo here. Oh, you're muted, Kyle.
Thank you. Sorry. We actually recorded this demo just for the sake of time to make sure that we cover all the topics. But here is the main login page once you get into Blitz permits. And from here, you're able to select the different things that you want to do between planning, building for residential or building for commercial. So in our case, we are just going to look at planning right now. But if we go over to the dashboard, from here, you can see a couple things that I think are very important to see. I'm going to pause the video just for a second. You can actually see the time estimated saved on all these plans. So on the right-hand side, you can see the different plans that were submitted, as well as the estimated time that the plans were supposed to take. And a lot of these are correct. We actually have timed these, and they've been around the average about 2 hours to some plans that are very, very complex or more. And in this case, it's taking just seconds for these to actually report and then finish. So in going through, you can select the different days, how long you want to go back and review. So in this case, 30 days back, all the reports, and I can see the actual time average taken that this is gone through the reporting and compliance process. And then I can actually look at the compliance data. In this case, I can see in the last 30 days how many items were actually compliant, how many had violations, and how many had missing information. A lot of times in our case, there's a lot of missing information that delays the permitting process. So if you're able to catch that up front before actually going through the process, it can really speed up the process of getting a permit. So in this case, if I go over to the planning side, and I can see all the plans that have been submitted, and this is kind of the back end, not normally what the end user would see. But I can go through and see all the plans that were submitted, and I can go in and actually add a new project. So adding the projects is easy as just going in and saying, here's my project name. From there, I can then select the zone I want. Now, most of the zoning will be done automatically. When you put in your address, it automatically will identify the zone district that is part of it. It's using GIS information to be able to look that up and then put the zone in there. So once they put in the address, the project name, and then they choose upload the file and submit it, the project or the plan is already being scanned and looked over. So you can see that one's in progress there. But for the sake of time, we're just going to pull up a project and report that's already been done. And from here, you can see the plan. It only took 13 seconds for this one to run. The main thing you can see, it's running on different codes that we have in the system. We can see that 31 were compliant, and then there was a number that were not compliant, or in this case, were not complete. So we can look at it, and this is a check-by-check list of those items, which is very, very easy for the end user to see. These are the items that were not complete in the project, and they needed to go back and resolve. So before even submitting all the way, they can see that, and they can resolve those issues. And you can see which ones were actually complete as part of that. This is the compliance section. So these are all the items that were not compliant that it found. So if there's a setback or a minimum lot, all that's being automatically discovered and marked as well. And then these are the items that were compliant on that list. So if it need to be above a certain square footage or a number of parking spaces, all that can be discovered. Here's the actual plans itself. So looking at the plans, everything in green was actually found as either compliant or complete. Everything in red is not. And there's actually comments next to every single item. So a end user or the reviewer can actually go and see and validate that everything is correct. So in this case, we can see that the square footage of the building is correct. I can see that the setback is not, and then I can easily review that and submit it back for review, or I can, as the end user, look at that and resolve it before actually finalizing. Again, I can go up and see the compliance and click on that to see that. So if I go back to the one that we submitted and pull up that report, you see that one only took 12 seconds as well. And again, it went through and did the compliance and completeness check. So that was in a dev environment, but if I was to switch over to actually our site, this is the Corona site, and same thing, I can add in a project here. It switches over to our city, and I can actually choose what type of review I'm wanting it to be. So I can say I'm going to do it for a zone and a general check. I can check it for completeness, and then I'm going to put in an address. And again, this is just a test address. And then I can upload my document so that it's already attached. So my plan can be there. There it is. And now there's a little problem with this one. We forgot since the project name was the same here, there's going to be a little bit of a challenge. It's going to say there's an error, but it's just because the naming was the same as an existing project. So we'll submit that. And really what I want to show you here is that even though that one's in progress, you can see there's one below that that's already been submitted. I can do an additional submission. So if I have a revision or something else that I'm changing, I can just go in and submit in a revision to it, and I can add that in there. So again, upload the document, resubmit it. And what that really does is it makes a new version of it. So I can have many, many different versions as we're going through and revising it. So I have version 1, version 2, but every time that I'm creating a new version, it's actually highlighting the differences between the versions. So I don't have to go back and review everything. I just have to review the items that have been changed. And that not only saves more time for our staff, because right now, as you go through the process, you really have to go back and review. Did someone make an additional change that I didn't know about? But it saves that time, and I'm only looking at and revising the items that are new and that have still issues with compliance or completeness. So that is our quick little demo.
And so I'll add just when we started this, I would say like probably 2 months in, when we were building out our library of code and then using California code, the process it probably took like 20 to 30 minutes for the AI to review it, and it was roughly 60% accurate, which wasn't great. But within about 5 months, the 5 month marker, we had gotten it down where it was under probably 2 minutes. And then we were getting about 90% accuracy at that point. And then today it's almost under a minute that it can evaluate it. And we're nearing like 98, 99% accuracy at this point. So it's improved and improved as we've trained it. And it's adaptable because it's an LLM. So it's adaptable to your code, right? You can start out with the state code, and then you'll plug in all your city, municipal codes or county codes, and then it'll run off that and be very sort of granular to you. So anyway, so that's it. That's what we got. If there's any questions, we're here to answer.
That's great. Anybody have any questions for them? Really impressive. Dan.
Yeah, I do have one quick question, Kyle. Does the AI interpret schematic drawings within a document, or is it only going off of text?
I should have been clear on that. Correct. It does both the visual and it does the actual text as well. So it's doing both at the same time.
So that's pretty cool, because I was thinking like the setbacks or, other violations like that. If it could glean those just from the drawings, that's pretty slick.
Yep, it does. Absolutely.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Chris?
I was just going to say the other part to this is it was difficult at first working with the department because AI is a scary thing. And so it was sort of culture shock, and then you had sort of the worry about people, it's going to take my job sort of thing. So we had to go through some education process with that, with staff. And at this point, they're very comfortable with it and how it's going to help them. And it just increased their efficiency. So they've been very happy with that part of it. But it wasn't without some hiccups at the beginning. I'll tell you that.
Chris Mallet?
Alan, Chris, thanks. This was really helpful. I was going to ask the companion piece to what you just said, Chris. What about customers and members of the public? Are you building trust, increasing their confidence? Do you have satisfaction metrics or any way that you track
Right now it's all internal, so they don't see, so if you were to submit a plan, let's say through Track It or Project Docs, right, that's the part they see. This happens in the background right now. The part that we're working on currently is, like I said, we're going to expand this out so that there will be an applet that citizens can download or developers download, and then they'll be able to use it kind of on their side prior to submission even to us. And so that's kind of the more public facing part. And when we do that, we're actually going to tie that to like a Qualtrics survey, right? So that we sort of understand and can develop with them at that point. So a lot of what you see today, this is all in the background. This is just what our plan checkers are seeing and the department sees.
Have you seen, though, you talked about the origin being customer dissatisfaction. Have you seen massively improved productivity internally? Like, do you know that your wait times are down and
Yes. Yeah, there was like a 95% reduce in wait times when the application's used. So we still have plan checkers that are doing it the manual process, and we have plan checkers that are using the product at the same time right now. And a lot of that, yeah, right, just to do some A/B testing to make sure that, right, it's effective. The other part is you're always training it. So you always still want eyes on it. It's still human kind of at the end. Even if we claim that we have 100%, right, like accuracy, we're still going to have human at the end checking kind of everything over. And that's why, like what Kyle was showing you, one of the components is we didn't want people to take for granted that just because the AI says it's correct, that it's correct, right? It's going to highlight everything and tell you why it was correct. So that's sort of part of our process as well. But yeah, overall, we've seen that, the reducing sort of in time and efficiency. I think per permit, it's about 5 times less. And I think we've calculated it. It's about a 15-hour savings per reviewer that's using it every week.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
No, thank you. It's scary when you get into it.
Sorry.
I'm Jay Redchick. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the City of Auburn. We actually were, I'll talk about this a little later, but we were actually looking at a very similar project for all the same reasons regarding planning, permitting, and code. And the startup we were working with had this aspect or feature where it's really more geared for your average citizen. An engineering firm comes in with their professional drawings, and you're really just kind of tweaking and telling them a few things. What we are looking at is the possibility of a citizen comes in, they may have downloaded a map from GIS and drawn a little box and said, I want to put my garage there. Can I? What we are looking at is if that the AI would give the answer and it would either say yes, or it would say, no, you can't, but here's how you can do it, and then kind of place it there. So it's giving, I think I've worked in communities all up and down the East Coast, and I think the best permit offices are the ones that concentrate with the citizens and businesses what they can do with their property instead of just spitting out an answer of what you can't do. So does yours do that, or is there plans of that?
There's plans to that, and a lot of it's based upon, because if you look at like I don't know, even the newer chat GTPs and stuff like that, they have that capability now, which they didn't probably even 2 months ago, right? To be able to ingest, like, let's say, a hand-drawn thing on a napkin, right? And actually take something that's hand-drawn and turn that into a more professional document of then which the AI can make, right, assessments on. So yes, the plan is that we should be able to ingest any type of drawn document, regardless if it's professionally drawn and written up, or if it's non-professionally drawn and written up like on a piece of paper, right, to have that same type of service. So yeah, the end goal is kind of like you said, because if we can get the questions answered before they even submit, then our process goes way faster just out of that, even if we don't automate anything.
Yeah.
So yes, that is part of the plan.
All right. Thank you.
Phoenix?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to ask just how you went about getting this particular product and vendor. I assume it's a third party. And just in bidding it out, did you have a good amount of qualified bidders? And how difficult was it to choose and tell who could actually do what you were asking for? So one thing that does come to the back of my mind is how capable state and local governments might actually be in telling who is able to do what they are asking for in this kind of space, because it is quite new and outside of, I think, a lot of our wheelhouses.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a great question. So we went through, it was an exception to bid, like in this particular case. A lot of times when we work with startups, it will be exception to bid because there usually is, or it's sole source because there's no one that does it. And in this particular case, when we went out to look, there was no one that we could find that could actually do. There were people that did parts of the process, but no one did sort of an end-to-end or was even focusing on sort of end-to-end. So for instance, there were some companies that were concerned just about the gating, at the beginning, but they didn't really get into the plan check components of it, so there's other aspects of it. So that once that was sort of narrowed down to, hey, there's no one really that does this except these people, or there's a few startups that do it. We did exception to bid to kind of go through that process. The other part is we kept it under where it went to our city council, so that we could pilot. And so a lot of times with startups, we'll contract with them, and we'll say like, hey, this is our limit. We're both going to take some risk here, right, going into it. And so we'll give them some seed money, and then we build with them. I'm always under, and this may be my private sector mentality, right? It's just that it's like fast to fail if we're going to fail. So we try to get to a minimum viable product to see what they can do and if they can actually accomplish, what they said they could. And if they can, then we proceed, and then we might have a secondary contract that will ride off the top of that, or we'll kill the project right at that point very quickly. So we try to invest a minimum amount. Sometimes we invest nothing. A lot of startups will just say, okay, they're just looking for a partner to help build something. And so they'll work with you until they get that minimum viable product, right, that you can then build upon. So that's kind of the methodology we've used. We've worked with a lot of different startups. We've also worked with some really big companies like Microsoft and those people developing components for government. And again, a lot of the times they're just looking for partners, right? Because government in general, we're not used to taking risk. That's kind of, we're dealing with taxpayer dollars, right? So we want to minimize whatever that risk is, right, to the utmost. At the same time, these private sector companies or startups, they're looking just for partners because they need to test theory, see if their product works, understand what your problems are, right? And so there's a lot of back and forth. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
That's great. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's really helpful for us to see this kind of very tangible example of a public sector entity leveraging this for real problems. It's really, really good. Now we're going to transition to a panel discussion on municipal topics, and I'd like to pass it over to Sarah Curran, the Director of GoPIF, and Sarah will guide us through the next portion of our program. Sarah, are you on and ready to take it away?
Thanks, Mary. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Curran. I am the new director of the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future. And today's panel is intended to ground our AI conversation in what is happening in local government here in Maine. So we have three excellent panelists from around the state who are going to help us understand how AI can potentially help Maine towns address capacity constraints at the local level. So I just want to point out that this conversation is really reflective of what makes Maine's task force unique compared to similar efforts in other states. The executive order that created this task force specifies that we're supposed to explore not only how AI can help state government operate, but also how it can help local governments. So this is a really important conversation today, and I'm really excited about the panelists who are going to help us think about ways AI can support the work that towns and cities in the state do. So let's get started. I'm happy to introduce three panelists from around the state today. Sandra Fournier is from the town of Mapleton. Jay Brenchick is from the city of Auburn, and Brian McDonald is from the Maine Municipal Association. Thank you all for being here today and sharing your stories with us. And I want to start just with a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get into some questions for each of them, and we'll have some time at the end for questions from the task force. So to begin with introductions, would each of you just briefly tell us your name, your role, and your community? And we'll start with Sandra, and then to Jay, and then Brian.
Hi, my name is Sandra Fournier. I am the town manager of three communities that act as one through an interlocal agreement. They are the towns of Mapleton, Castle Hill, and Chapman.
Thank you. Jay, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jay Brenchick. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the City of Auburn. I grew up in Freiburg, Maine, but until a few years ago, all of my economic development experience was in New Hampshire, Florida, and Virginia. And but now I'm here in Maine in my home state.
Thanks, Jay. Brian?
I'm Brian McDonald, the Director of IT and Administration at the Maine Municipal Association. We, of course, support every municipality in the state.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Sandra, let's start with you if we could. Can you help us get a better sense of the communities that you serve and the sort of your role, what the towns are like, and the big issues that you're wrestling with right now?
Okay, so I represent three communities, like I stated before. Total population of all three is just around 3,000. We are very rural, very small. And of course, with limited resources, there are a lot of individuals in this municipality that wear multiple hats, which is why the AI function comes in handy for us.
Great. I bet a lot of towns can see themselves in the description you just provided. Can you talk a little bit about how AI is starting to show up in your work and sort of how you've been starting to use it?
Yeah, so I have just recently dived into the AI world. I'm not as vast knowledge in it as what I would want to be. However, I am dipping my toes into it. I've started to use it to analyze our comprehensive plan, see of areas that I may be able to update that are not things that might be apparent to me. I utilize it a lot when I am looking at trying to revamp our employee evaluation. I really wanted it to be more of a conversation piece more than it was a tool for human resources, disciplinary, or even lacking in skill. I wanted my employees to feel comfortable when they come into an employee evaluation and really talk about their needs and try to wrap that around that. I also use AI to make myself sound great in emails when I'm responding back, because 9 out of 10 times I want to be very quick and to the point, and sometimes I need to have a little bit more well polished of an email to send out there. So that has been my #1 tool when I first started utilizing AI, and it kind of has grown from there. But I do have hopes of expanding my usage on AI and see what avenues that I could really utilize it in. I'm a little hesitant on some areas because obviously they're in the wrong hands. AI can be a tool that you don't know if you're actually talking to that individual person, or if you're actually talking to a bot. So there is some of that hesitation that I do have with the technology, but overall, I think it has allowed me to be able to move through the multiple hats that I wear, not just as a town manager, a lot more quickly, a lot more effective and efficiently, and being able to complete my job tasks and responsibilities.
That's great. And I love the sort of diversity of the different ways that you're employing it. Thank you for that. Jay, turning now to you. I know you've been thinking a lot about AI sort of in the public facing duties and specifically around economic development. Do you want to share a bit how you're thinking about AI in the city of Auburn?
Sure, thank you. First I'll touch on a project we've been working on a bit for planning, permitting, and code, but I won't go into details of what the tool is, because essentially it's very similar, the same thing as the city of Corona. But our motivation in doing it was slightly different. We started working with an entrepreneur and with somebody who's got some expertise in AI to work on developing the same type of tool that the city of Corona has. But the reason, our motivation there was really to educate ourselves on AI. And with the hopes that in the coming months or year or so, that there would be a vendor with an out-of-the-box tool for us to use. But because we had done this work and testing and working with this developer, we would understand capabilities and what's possible and what isn't possible, and understand what questions to ask vendors when going through the procurement process. Another thing that we've been working on is I had approached the Rue Institute with an idea of using AI to develop a back office that would eventually become a public tool for economic development professionals to create an in-depth analysis of all the parameters that are needed to assist in the development of a comprehensive business assistance and incentive package for new businesses coming into the state or helping local businesses expand. And essentially, what it would do is, I've been doing this for like 25 years. And so I'm overall, big picture wise, I know the federal, state, and local incentives and resources, but there are other things such as foundations. And here in Maine, we have quite a number of foundations, and there are other resources. And then there are foundations that work in conjunction with our community colleges for workforce things. So you would essentially input everything that a project is. It's a 100,000 square foot building, creating 50 jobs, blah, 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 all the different parameters. And then it would come out and deliver for you essentially an incentive package that you would most certainly need to go over. And you need the people looking at it. And this wouldn't replace the workforce partners we have. This wouldn't replace the workforce development person from the community college, but instead what it would do is create a strategy or a game plan for all the partners on how they could work together. So that was, and then I realized, that's great on paper. And initially the Rue Institute said, yeah, that's a great idea. Who's going to test it? And that's where I came into my roadblock, because I thought, well, I don't have enough staff and time to be constantly testing this. So the idea came about that we would work with the Economic Development Council of Maine, as well as the state economic development folks, each having their own role, the state helping with input of the types of data we'd want to include, and the Economic Development Council of Maine members all serving as testers for this. We haven't moved forward yet, because right about the time that we were really getting excited about this possibility, I was asked to join the AI task force. The governor announced she was going to have a task force, so we kind of stepped it back onto a back burner so that I could spend a little more time learning about AI and gaining some of the intellectual capital that that this task force provides.
Well, I'm glad you're able to bring your experiences to the benefit of the task force. Thanks, Jay. Brian, I want to turn to you and think about, I'm taking a step back. We've heard from representatives from sort of very different communities in Maine, and you hear from all sorts of communities across the states, lots of them. And I know that you recently had a conference on AI. I'm curious sort of what you're hearing from communities in Maine as they think about how they might use AI.
Yeah, thank you. So I think a lot of people have taken off and focused on the Gen AI capabilities, the emails, the clarity, the reviewing of documentation or creation of brainstorming topics. I think one of the burgeoning things that is popping out now, and what we kind of are trying to start introducing, is the analytical capabilities. And certainly the demo we viewed just a little bit ago shows that analytical side, and that's a very great benefit. So when I've talked to municipalities that are struggling with staffing, or maybe some experience challenges, they've had some long-term staff retire, some newer people come in, they're looking for something to bolster the gap between those long-term experience and somebody who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience. So when we start looking at, and I made some notes, we start looking at things like assessing, and using AI tools to kind of better predict assessments and track actual value to assessed value. Even things like determining what might be the best interlocal agreement or mutual aid compacts to kind of enter into. So rural communities are looking to start kind of grouping together and creating some regionalization. And it's a little difficult sometimes to determine how to do that. So looking at AI as kind of taking in all of those variables and determining what might be a good partnership, even with police, fire, ambulance, planning boards, planning road repavings, anything that where organizations or municipalities could regionalize, having AI kind of point out some either flaws or some opportunities, I think is something that I've heard people are interested in. They haven't seen a lot come out yet that has offered, like in that sector, offered any help. But there are a lot of municipalities who are starting to just wonder, hey, can I put my challenges, my opportunities into some system and have the AI pop out and go, hey, you should go talk to these 3 municipalities, or hey, you don't need to pave your roads as often, or hey, you've got a lot of ambulance calls in this area and your coverage is a little off. So I think there is an opportunity to really invest in the analytic side of it to bolster that local decision making. That would be very, very valuable, both with the experience that's retiring and with the staffing shortages that municipalities are experiencing. And most of our members obviously are rural, they are the Mapletons, they are those smaller municipalities, but they have a large area to support. They have a large number of roads, a lot of acreage to deal with. So it's not like you have fewer citizens, so you have less things to do. And I think AI from an analytics standpoint is where we really could gain a big opportunity and a big advantage in a state that's as rural as Maine is.
That's great. Thank you, Brian. I want to open it up and see if there are questions from the task force members for any of our panelists.
We clearly did a great job.
I have a question. What are you all hearing from your constituents about AI? Are folks interested in you? Are they coming to you and saying, I have ideas? Are they coming with concerns? I'm curious sort of what the public perception around this is in your communities.
Who would you like to go first?
Go for it, Jay.
Okay, I think Brian was nodding his head to your specific question, and so I'm gonna address that question a slightly different. As the economic developer for the city, I work a lot with our manufacturers. And so they're very inquisitive about AI and what I can do as government to help introduce them to AI. So we have a group that meets once a month, and we'll bring in a guest speaker from the Rue Institute or University of Maine Advanced Manufacturing. And then we'll bring in somebody from the state to talk about incentives that would support that new equipment or what have you. So that's really where I'm coming from. But I think my guess is Brian and Sandra can talk more about constituency.
That's great. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I kind of have been trying to quantify this question because a lot of people are saying, you know, why are some people very hesitant with AI? What's the core issue? And the way I kind of have thought about it is that it's the difference between a self-driving car and a car with driver assist, right? And so a lot of people are very afraid of that self-driving car, AI making its own decisions and then putting those towards some action. Versus nobody has an issue with AI in your car telling you, hey, don't merge yet, you know, and you make the decision of what action to take based on that input. And so I think my explanation to people, and again, the demo we saw earlier in this meeting was a really great example of that. It's not making the decision for you, it's bolstering your decision making. So my input to people when they're concerned with AI is I said, you know, you're not building an AI tool potentially that's going to do your job for you and make decisions and kind of go off the rails. You're building something that's going to assist you with your decision making or lower level tasks, but you still have control over the process. And so I think a lot of the concern is that AI is going to turn into this robot machine that just goes out and does its own thing. And there's kind of that middle ground that people are kind of not understanding or maybe kind of forgetting about. Because as much as I would like to have a robot assistant that does everything for me, I think the real value is in the kind of quote unquote driver assist features. And so when you see things like the demo we viewed, I've looked at some people doing some assessing things, you know, sewer water planning, mapping, you know, things where AI is interpreting or even reviewing budgets and bringing back to people, hey, based on this information, here's some ideas we have, starting to be used with the RFP process for procurement. So it's a tool. It's another person in the room to put their input in. And I think once that idea kind of gets across to people and people start to understand that we're not just setting it and forgetting it and letting it fly the plane, I think that's the understanding that once people have, they kind of start going, oh, okay, this isn't really this big scary thing. And most of the people I've talked to who are just way on the outside, really haven't even looked at AI, their impression is AI is going to come in and just start going rogue and doing its own thing, not understanding that there's this intermediary there where that human interaction is still there. And once I've explained that to people and they've seen what a real AI tool does, like this tool we just looked at, I think they're a lot more comfortable and they go, oh, wow, no, that's actually a really good idea. So I think it's a lot of education to explain that it's not, you know, the Terminator. It's kind of an assistant.
Thanks, Brian. That's a great way to explain it. Sandra, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm just going to add to what Brian has stated. As someone who grew up on the Terminator movies, that was my hesitation as well. I didn't want to have a tool that could potentially take over what I was essentially doing, but I utilized it a lot. I'm glad he had brought up requests for proposals, RFPs or RFPs. That's where I would mainly use that for. Specifically, we are updating our tax maps and going into a GIS software type website design. I have no background knowledge in GIS software, or what I should even be looking for in a proposal, or how to write a proposal based around those types of parameters. So that's where AI had helped me out in that, and being able to create a proposal off of what I needed without needing to actually have to learn about GIS in order to be able to write a proposal, what I'm looking for. Another example that I had used it on was our personnel policy with the paid Maine family medical leave that we had. Again, that was a recent statute that had come in. It was really complex on how we were going to initiate that, along with the new tax acquired property language for our treasurer. So both those areas, I needed to update some of our policies to vamp around the new tax law without needing to have to do a deep dive into the law and have a complete understanding in order to be able to write my policy. So those are great areas that I think artificial intelligence comes into play. That, again, it's a tool to use. It doesn't actually take over, because you do have to, somewhat organize, and no, it's not quite what I'm looking for, because it will give you a bunch of information in the beginning, and you have to kind of summarize that down, or mitigate that down to really fit around what you are looking for. But it doesn't take over your particular job. It doesn't do your job for you. You need to still have some input in there.
Yeah, those are great, very real examples, Sandra. Thank you. So the last question here, I want to give credit to. Oh,
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love all of the examples. I think I'm in charge of the kind of the administrative services for the University of Maine system, and so I think just all kinds of opportunities that we're realizing on the back office side of things, some of which you've touched on here. I'm really interested though, when you take it to that next phase, and we're all going to take it there at some point, where you're more public facing. Have you started to think about how much of it is, how much you're going to disclose, how much of it is somebody submits permits, and are you thinking of opt-ins, or is this just going to be, I think eventually it's just going to be what we do. And so anyway, I'm curious how you're thinking about how you talk about this to your constituents.
Great. Thanks for the question. Anybody want to respond to that?
I know on my end, it's going to be, because again, university system, town, municipal government, there's a lot of public sector that's involved in what we do. So yeah, there's going to be some areas that we're going to utilize that. But with all things in government, we try to be as transparent as much as we can. So if and when we start to utilize AI software to essentially maybe even look through applications that we receive. A lot of us are receiving those solar farm ordinances applications now. That would be a great tool to be able to navigate that through, especially with the bond piece to it and understanding that concept. So I think it's how you want to utilize the AI software in your association or your organization, and make that be as transparent as possible as well when you are talking with your residents. Yeah, we're going to plug this into our program and have this go through the process for us and spit out whatever the outcomes is that you're looking for. I think it's really important to let your residents know that you're doing that too, but also kind of shy on how much information are you going to be putting out there, because not everything that we deal with is public knowledge. We do have private records here, birth, marriage, death records. All of that is still essentially private. So those would not be features that AI system would utilize, because you want to be a little bit protective of that data.
I'll just tag team a little bit on there. I think that as companies and localities in the state develop policies around AI, we've been working on developing our policy, and one of the things is the transparency of when you use an AI tool, that you're letting not just the citizens know, but even simple things like reports between one director within the municipality to another director, that you inform them that AI was used. So it's I think transparency is huge.
Yeah, I would just say from our perspective, and what we're kind of looking at now is from a governance standpoint, what we're really trying to do with transparency is obviously to close the tools we're using, but look out for any type of harm that could come about, such as bias or any type of negative impact. So I think being transparent is the first step to doing that, because but you're always going to have people who review the content. Like, again, I go back to the demo we viewed earlier, maybe the AI gets the setback wrong or something wrong, and somebody can always come back and go, hey, I think there's a problem here. There'll be a review internally, and maybe we determine the AI tool has made this mistake and we got to switch systems. Or it's always about monitoring and doing those risk managements ongoing. And transparency is really just the start of that. But you do have to definitely be careful about what you disclose because of the information that's used. So a lot of great points.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thank you all. I think we're at time, so I'm going to wrap up this conversation. I do want to just thank you all for sharing your stories and your examples with us. I think it's always really helpful to hear very concrete examples of how communities are using this. And Brian, I know you had talked with some of the GoPIF staff in preparation for this call about the opportunity for Maine to really lead in this space in terms of how AI can help small communities. And this has been a really helpful conversation for us starting to think about how that could work. So thank you all very much. And I will turn it back over to Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Sarah. And thank you to all the panelists. Really great information and really very practical views that are super helpful. Okay, now we want to turn to from the municipal level to the state level. And we brought in two speakers on this topic who are each going to spend some time running through aspects of state government use of AI. And first up, many of you will know Nick Marquis, Maine's Chief Information Officer and a member of our AI Technical Advisory Committee. Nick is going to spend the first 10 short minutes taking us on a history lesson through actions the state has taken already to prepare for AI. So I want to turn it over to Nick to do that.
Thanks, Mary. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mary said, I'm Nick Marquis. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the state of Maine. And I've had, the privilege of kind of helping shape how state government gets to onboard Gen AI and how we respond to what is really a huge shift in technology for state government. Some of you may know early on, roughly June of 2023, the state did implement a 6-month moratorium on the onboarding of Gen AI products. It ultimately did extend to another 3 months to a full 9 months. That was really designed to do a couple of things for us. It was designed to give us an opportunity to run some risk assessments looking at security and privacy, give us some opportunity to do some research around AI bias and what challenges might come there for the state. And then also gave us an opportunity to dig into the regulatory landscape. The state has probably not all of them, but has many of the 3 and 4 letter regulatory compliance agencies that they have to answer to in terms of the data that we have access to and the data that we hold. So that was another really big piece that we wanted to make sure we had a strong understanding of. And then reputational concerns. Out of that moratorium, we also started the process of developing our Gen AI guiding principles and our acceptable use policy, which has now been published. And then, really focusing on the ability to prepare for secure and compliant, introduction of Gen AI tools. In the development of governance and policy, we leveraged a process we refer to as a business acceleration team. We brought technology experts and we brought some research and advisory firms into a group and gave them a charter and asked them to take off and design, looking at all the market realities with Gen AI at the time, design what we really needed to establish as a firm governance and policy footprint for state government. we spent quite a bit of time, or the group spent quite a bit of time working through to align policy and governance to NIST best practices, looking at the emerging federal guidance on AI. That obviously has shifted a bit. But again, it was to try and create a firm footing for state government to take off with Gen AI. Coming out of the moratorium and coming out of the BAT team and publishing the governance and policy, we've started to move into some kind of high value, low risk pilots. I think it was Sarah that talked about it earlier. Some of the key components of Gen AI is those productivity enhancement pieces that allow you to do your work. So we've engaged with Microsoft on a pilot with their Copilot product that integrates with the Microsoft Office 365 suite. We've spread that out to approximately 150 users across state government, giving them the opportunity to leverage the tools, see what it can do for them. There's a full team involved in that pilot, and they are regularly reporting back through surveys as to, the user's experience, the benefits that they see, the challenges they've experienced with the product. We are also getting ready to start the same in terms of a pilot, again, about 150 users with OpenAI ChatGPT. Our policy allows for the use of the free version of ChatGPT with constraints. This will give us the opportunity to really dive in to see what the product can do from terms of a licensed perspective and how we can understand the product better and how we can understand the data that's going in and being used. And then one of the other big pieces we're working on now, just getting started, is creating a center of excellence for AI within state government and within Maine IT. Gen AI is going to be a transformational technology for state government. We're probably going to be a little bit slower on the uptake than others, but the amount of innovative minds across the landscape of state agencies that make up the executive branch, we know that there's opportunities abound to improve constituent experience, help hedge against sometimes in areas where we have trouble recruiting and hiring staff. There's real opportunities for saving, and it's going to require a long commitment in terms of care and feeding. So we're currently recruiting for a AI Center of Excellence director. I have a couple of other positions that once that director is hired, we'll be filling to start really kind of staffing up and building that Center of Excellence. In short, we're trying to take a structured, responsible approach to generative AI, making sure that we're dealing with potentials of risk, piloting use, making sure we have firm governance, and building that long-term Center of Excellence to maintain the technology going forward, because we know it's gonna continue. Any questions?
That's great. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
I think we're gonna now turn to an executive agency leader from the state that's a little further ahead of Maine, to hear examples and use cases that will hopefully inspire some great conversation. And so I'd like to welcome now Commissioner Robert Azzaro-Angelo, who leads New Jersey's Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Commissioner, welcome from the great state of New Jersey, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you for having me here today. Hello to all my friendly Mainers. Uh-oh, I lost my screen. Oh, Sharon, great. With me on the call today is one of Maine's greatest exports, my Director of UI Modernization, Jill Gutierrez from Freeport, Maine, who is going to maybe answer some questions later if necessary. So real quick, I don't know that we're necessarily further ahead, as Nick said. I think that all governments are sort of still the starting point. Really, maybe we're using some of it, but it sounds like there is use going on in Maine. But thanks for having me here today. There's no doubt that AI is becoming part of our daily lives, and we know that in New Jersey, if we use it wisely and ethically, it can boost productivity and help government agencies like ours better serve residents. At our Department of Labor Workforce Development, we wear many hats. I know, like my colleague Laura Fortman does, my counterpart and former colleague and wonderful person. Hi, Laura. We distribute unemployment insurance and family medical leave benefits. We assist workers in finding jobs. We cover public safety, public employee safety here through our state plan. We track labor market information. We work directly with employers to solve workforce needs. We handle workers' compensation for those injured on the job or worse. And make sure that all workers get the pay and protections they're entitled to under our wide array of worker protections laws that we have here in New Jersey. And that's just a short summary. So with all this and more on our plates, we're finding innovative ways to put AI to work. So I'd like to share a few examples of how we're using AI both behind the scenes and to directly serve residents. So just some quick brief background. Our governor, Phil Murphy, created the AI task force in October 23 to develop policies for fair AI use by state employees to enhance economic growth. The report and recommendations are available to the public. A state policy, also publicly available, was created guiding AI use by those who work in the state, keeping ethical practices like fact-checking and confidentiality at the core. State workers are assigned a free virtual AI training course. In our department, we made this mandatory, and I'm super proud that we're the first department to have 100% participation. And this was not a quick 30-minute online training where you just check some boxes at the end. This was, I think, a 9-segment, multi-hour training that took many days to complete. This is required prior to using our state's own NJ AI assistant chatbot, which was launched by our Office of Innovation here in New Jersey. Just real quick, I heard mentioned before earlier about, and the obvious at this point, people's workers' fears about AI. Before we did the training course, I think during the time of our AI task force, we commenced a survey throughout the state. And surprisingly, public sector workers in New Jersey were way more excited about AI than the private sector. Now, I think it surprised me because I'm always fearful that folks in government, we fear that we're the bureaucrats, we're the ones slowing things down. We have all these rote jobs, repetitive jobs that people think that it's more likely AI is going to replace. But I think that our workers in the state and elsewhere in the public sector, we're the victims of overlapping policies, internal processes that have been handed down from generation to generation of government workers. So I think we're excited about it because we know it can sort of unrestrain us from some of this work, so we can focus on our customers, focus on our constituents and our residents, not some processes that are probably, for the most part, still baked into the days where we use paper for everything. So here you can see a screenshot of the chatbot homepage, aiassistant.nj.gov. The site is only available to state workers, contractors, and those with access to our state online training system. Like I mentioned, the training course must be completed first. It's much like ChatGPT or a similar tool. You enter your prompts in the box and it returns what you've specified. I've used this tool to draft a speech from bulleted information and to summarize and create questions based on a 152-page document. And hot off the press, this week we had a public hearing for a rule proposal. I won't bore you with what it is, but it's about independent contractor versus employee. A lot of interest in that. We received an email summary of 1,752 comments submitted by a third-party group. Basically, it was like someone's been some kind of online template where they send out a blast email, fill in this template, and we'll send this along to the Department of Labor for you. So almost all 1,700 entries were the same thing, but there were some uniqueness in some of them. So instead of having to go through one by eye, I submitted it into our NJ AI assistant chatbot, and I basically prompted it saying, in this document, there's 1,752 comments about this rule proposal. Most of them follow a similar template. Please prepare me a list of all the different unique arguments made with no duplications. And it spit out a list of about 17 different points that were made, not in every single one of them, but about 9 or 10 of them were in every single one. And then at some point, these folks online must put in their own piece also. So make sure that we're catching all those for the comment period as we're legally mandated to, and just to save us probably hours of time of going through each one of those. External AI services like ChatGPT are currently blocked on our state system. So since the pandemic, remember that, a huge spotlight has been on unemployment insurance, or UI, and how we can make it easier for workers to access these benefits. AI is helping us enhance language access and customer experience in this area. We created a human-made glossary of complex UI terms and phrases, which we then translated to Spanish. To be clear, we had to first translate them out of UI speak into regular speak. And I know Laura and others know what I'm talking about. These translations have been so effective, they're being used to feed AI in other states and benefit even more workers in need. In fact, I'm proud to say the share that's already used by the Illinois Department of Employment Security website. Last December, we launched LLM training materials developed with U.S. Digital Response and Google.org. These materials can assist government agencies create AI translation assistance for UI content through off-the-shelf generative AI models. This will help to make public benefits information clearer and more accessible for workers in need. We use these LLM materials to optimize our state AI platform and pave the path for other states and benefit programs interested in developing their own tailored solutions. We've been able to translate complex UI jargon into plain Spanish about 3 times faster than before and eliminate the need for traditional translation methods and experts, which usually require us to contract outside help. Anybody here in government knows how difficult procurement can be. So anytime we can eliminate that process means more time for our own staff to focus on the work ourselves. We found that translations produced by our AI model are about 90% close to the quality of a human expert, illustrating that while AI offers a lot of promise for translations, it's critical that humans remain part of the equation, which you'll hear me say more about. You'll hear me say that more than once today. Maybe AI should be my presentation. Next one, our artificial intelligence drafting assistant, or ADA, is helping us cut down on administrative work and remove duplicative processes, giving staff more time for customers. So this is in our unemployment appeals area, which, like many states, is still the largest source of quote-unquote backlog for our claimants. They handle cases where a worker or employer may dispute eligibility for unemployment insurance benefits to the tune of 40,000 cases a year, all with just 35 examiners. These cases involve a hearing and then drafting a decision based on the hearing. The appeals team has been piloting the AI drafting assistant, ADA, to evaluate the 3 most common appeals issues that we have in New Jersey, which make up about 45% of all cases, which are voluntary quit, misconduct, and gross misconduct. This tool was developed with the U.S. Digital Response and Google Fellows as well. So after an appeals examiner conducts their hearing, they enter their findings and their decision into ADA, which is trained on New Jersey regulations and presidential case law. ADA will draft a summary, organize the facts, cite applicable regulations, fix grammar issues or typos, and format the document. If ADA cannot create a draft based on the facts provided, the case is flagged for review by a supervising appeals examiner. Otherwise, the draft is produced, and the appeals examiner can review and edit. This is important. So while ADA can help draft a decision, in the end, an employee's name signs off on each decision, so they must verify everything. It's like ADA is the new intern helping with the first draft. It takes about a minute and a half for ADA to create a draft versus 20 to 30 minutes for an agent to produce one manually. This saves time for agents to be available on phone calls with claimants and employers for one-on-one interaction, which they'll never be, and there's an endless stream of that. So in this regard, I am not worried about losing any work or any jobs, just having more timely decisions for our customers. We're currently moving from a prototype system to a production-ready tool that can support more issues and more complexity. We're rolling out the tool to more examiners every week. Just onboarded another 8 last week. And this is another important point. Go slow and take the time to develop and test incrementally. After ADA creates a draft, there's a mandatory feedback rating for each decision so it can track accuracy and rate the job that ADA is doing. Programs like ADA can greatly reduce administrative overhead while keeping human agents at the center. And if ADA gets a good rating, she is going to get a raise next year. Next slide. On the customer-facing side, in March 24, we launched mycareer.nj.gov, an interactive cloud-based hub that provides personalized career resources. We developed this tool with our State Innovation Office of Innovation and the nonprofit Research Improving People's Lives. My Career NJ includes an NJ Career Navigator, which uses AI to provide personalized recommendations on career paths, job postings, and training programs. By harnessing the power of AI, the Navigator offers real-time insights into skills that are in demand and the opportunities available across various industries. Here's how it works. Job seekers log in and upload their resumes or enter their job titles and qualifications. The application analyzes this information using AI to identify not just what the jobs are, but to identify the skills associated with their current roles, which many workers, including myself, have a hard time putting into words. Users can refine the list to include skills they'd like to leverage or develop further. Based on these inputs, the application generates tailored recommendations for job openings, relevant training programs, or potential career transitions that align with those skills and aspirations. My Career NJ also includes the Training Explorer, because we also cover private career schools in my department as well, where users can search for certifications, professional development, apprenticeships, and more. With AI, this tool can analyze vast amounts of data, including our wage records and training outcomes that only we as a state have access to. So not some kind of projection by LinkedIn or some other private company about what may be happening in the job market and on salaries and wages. We have that information through wage records in the state. So we're using that data that only we have access to. We can pinpoint viable career transitions and training programs. The goal is to identify job opportunities and programs that can boost earnings, professional growth, and skills. I can tell you how much a training program will cost versus the possible outcomes, so users can make informed decisions about their futures. My career demonstrates how leveraging AI and data can transform workforce development, educational program design, and career guidance. It empowers individuals to make strategic career moves and aligns educational content with market demands. But it's very important that the basis for all this is the transparency that we have in our training programs. Firstly, we have quality assurance measures in New Jersey. So we have all these measurements back from the training programs that help feed the data into this AI algorithm. So since March of 24, My Career NJ has had almost 1 million total users, which is an amazing start. It's not super, they're not unique users, but we're in the hundreds of thousands of unique users, which is more than 10% of our total workforce. As you can see from the month to month, almost all our monthly users are first timers. It's fantastic that more and more workers are being introduced to this tool, which is available in both English and Spanish. A large majority are using a mobile device versus desktop. And our top 4 most searched occupations this month have been social or human services, assistants, medical assistants, paralegals or legal assistants, and customer service reps. So in closing, AI is helping us reduce administrative burdens, such as with the ADA tool. It can also be a backbone for easy-to-use customer-facing tools like My Career NJ, and importantly, can help you with your own workload in your department. As I said before, it's not replacing DOL workers, but helping them do their jobs more effectively. So in the 6 months that we have left in our current administration in New Jersey, we're working hard to leave things better for the next crew, which includes sharpening our processes and renewing our residents' faith in our department's ability to deliver services, and AI is helping with both. So I'll stop there. Thanks again for having me here today. I'm happy to answer questions if we have time. And I'm definitely looking forward to my invite to the release of the task force report, whenever that may be in May. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Rob. That was really a fantastic and comprehensive presentation. And I think we all want an ADA right now for everything, to untangle everything.
It's funny, we just presented at Code for America Summit last month. And I can't remember what state it was, like came up to our folks, like asked them, oh, can I buy this? Like, can I purchase this from you?
Are you selling it? Yes.
Right.
That's great. Fantastic. I don't think we worked in time for questions at this juncture, and we're scheduled to have a break in 2 minutes. But if there's anything burning, maybe we could address with Rob before he leaves us.
Oh, I have to say thank you to Rob, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon. But I really appreciate this, and as always, incredible information and great work.
Thank you, Laura.
It's great.
Do you have time for a quick question before we break?
Sure.
This is Sarah Gagne-Holmes. I'm the commissioner at the Department of Health and Human Services, and just really wanted to thank you for your presentation. It was very inspiring, and it makes me think about a number of ways we could use AI. I just was curious, do you have like a specific team focused on developing these pilots to do the work, or are you?
We have a 40-person AI development team in the department. No, we don't. We do not have that. We rely greatly on our friends in our State Office of Innovation, who are great partners with us. But a lot of it is the internal work. I mentioned before, Jill Gutierrez on the call. We have an Office of Unemployment Modernization, which isn't just about the technology. It's about the process for the claims and how we deal with our customers. So I would say it's sort of scattershot across the board, but definitely with the guidance from our Office of Innovation. We're always looking for new projects to try to undertake. Our commissioner, I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to an event in Oklahoma City next month with a bunch of your state counterparts, specifically about using AI in the health and human services sector. We're interested in that as well for Department of Labor, especially if any of these work requirements end up happening in the federal government. Our interaction and your and Laura's interaction are going to be very important, more important than they've ever been, if they're not already important. So I'm definitely looking forward to having those kind of meetings and interactions. So we're always here to help whatever we can. We're never embarrassed to steal someone else's idea or too proud to share what we've done. So we're always looking to make all of our lives easier.
Great. Well, we may be in touch. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Good meeting you.
All right, thank you, Rob. Okay, we are going to take a 5-minute break and be back here by 1:20. Feel free to, shut off your cameras and step away, but please be back by 1:20. We're going to open it up for discussion and Dave will lead you. See you in a minute.
Okay. Looks like we've got the team back promptly on schedule, so we appreciate that. And I will say we had some fascinating and very interesting conversations during today's session. So I appreciate that as well. I'm interested to know what stood out to you from the speakers that you heard today, and how does that align with your observations about how AI could play a role to better delivering public services in Maine? And that's public services here. We're talking about both the state level and at the local level. Now, Commissioner Holmes, I noticed that you had some interest in and sort of pep in your voice. So I'm wondering if you can sort of lead off that portion of the conversation. One thing I'll say to all the participants is we're always interested to make sure that we're asking the right questions for the subgroup. So try and pay attention to that and see if there's anything that you think we should add or subtract or edit slightly. But Commissioner Gagne Holmes, what are your thoughts on how AI can help better the services we deliver in Maine, and how do they align with your observations?
I mean, I have to say that Robert's presentation really did pique my interest. I don't get the opportunity to stop and think long about AI, and I know that our offices are using it at a minimal level. I've used it to help me create speeches and things like that, but to be able to use it in ways that could allow for my team to have more customer engagement and still get and process the work quickly, I think is really of interest. In particular, just a number of things that Robert flagged would be of interest to the department. Like, we have our own Division of Administrative Hearings, and to be able to use AI in some of those hearings, like Robert described, would be incredibly helpful to allow us to spend more time on the hearings that are more complicated. I'm just really fascinated and curious too, like, how prepared is state government to do this work? Like, I know that we've got our policy in place and our guidelines, and the right AI tools are being vetted by OIT. I'm just curious if the department is interested, like, how would we move forward? Because I certainly am not the IT person, but could see value in moving a lot of the administrative work that the Department of Health and Human Services has, so we can really focus then on our clients.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And when you say do this work, I'm guessing that you're referring to that work that is sort of defining, identifying the data, training the data, and making it responsive to solving a specific problem. Is that right?
Precisely.
Yeah. And so that's a good question for this task force to sort of entertain and think about. There are a lot of opportunities, but how do we mobilize those opportunities? What are the resources that we have, and how are we going to develop that? I'm open to other thoughts. Commissioner Fortman, you obviously had connectivity with the last presenter. And Ryan, I know that it's the public university space as opposed to the municipality space, but you've implemented some AI tools, and so you may help be able to guide some of the conversation as well.
Yeah, I don't know how much guiding I can do, so I'll defer to Ryan for that. But yeah, Rob and I work together regularly, and we both served together at the U.S. Department of Labor about 8 years ago. But what his conversation for me triggered, actually, Commissioner Gagne Holmes and I had been in a 1-hour meeting just prior to this meeting, talking about many of the things that he raised about upcoming potential policy changes and how the Department of Labor and Department of Health and Human Services can work better, share data better. I think the piece that was missing, I totally missed it from that conversation. We're talking about additional follow-up conversations, but my focus was on the data. And I think that we need to insert an AI overlay into that conversation. Is, how can we use that as a tool? So that was a big takeaway for me. We've already recognized the need for the departments to continue. We've been working together. How can we continue that work? But this gave me some additional ideas. So Nick, I think that's putting you on the hook a little bit because we're going to be following up with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, can I
Right.
jump?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so others, maybe just to organize the conversation, feel free to, use the Zoom hand if you've got a comment. But Ryan, I sort of baited you into the conversation, so I'm interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, you may regret it because I start babbling about this topic and I just go on for hours. But I thought Nick laid it out really well. I'll say that I feel like the university is about a year ahead of where state government is, and so we started in a similar fashion, which was a commitment from our trustees and from our leadership that this was a space that we were going to go down, and so we set aside a reasonable amount of resources so that we could demo every tool that came out. We've got a pilot group and we've got task forces on the campuses that are focusing on different pieces and developing those policies. But what we found, I guess we're 11 months now into those pilots. We have started to deploy those tools along the way where we thought that they made sense. Some of them are just leveraging the traditional $20 and $30 a month tools, and some of it is, we've got some really smart people in IT who can take a concept and use AI to develop a tool that a year ago we would have paid $100,000 for and been happy about it, and now we can create those tools right away. Our biggest challenge, and we're just getting into this piece of it, is the training piece. There's no one, despite how big our system is, there's nobody that wakes up every day and thinks about AI training except me. And I also have a CFO job. And so we've set up some internal training. We set up a 6-week certificate class. So we're breaking that out now up into a bunch of lunchtime brown bag sessions that we're starting in July. And so we've got a ton of interest in those. So just spend an hour with Ryan at lunch and I'll show you how to use Gemini to organize your email and your calendar. And then we're going to do a session on OpenAI. And so we're doing that by Zoom. We're going to let as many people as we want in those. We just announced them yesterday. We've got 155 people that have already signed up for our first ones. That's how we're gonna spread the gospel. I think if it's like me, we're gonna try to find the people out there. We're gonna hook them on a use case and get them excited about it. I sent out a message to my team last week because we've talked about it here, I think, a couple of times about this huge majority of our employees out there that want to contribute but don't know whether they can or what kind of direction they're getting from leadership. And so I've got about 400 people or so that work for me. And I sent out a memo to them last week that said, we're going all in. At the end of the day, I deliver administrative services. I did that when I was in state government. I do that in the university system. It's facilities, it's finance, it's procurement, it's HR. It's all of the things that are ripe for this. It's a different conversation in the classroom, and that's a slower conversation. But we don't need to wait to realize these back office efficiencies that are just going to mean that we're charging campuses less and more money is going into the classroom. So we're going all in.
Yeah. Is there, and again, if others just raise their hand and chime in or ask follow-up questions, but Ryan, your cases, parallel cases that people in municipal offices or people in state government may be able to identify with and replicate, and they're not necessarily sort of those classroom oriented cases. I'm wondering how you sort of prioritize, or if you're just sort of throwing it out there and giving people the opportunity to sort of grow it up and create a culture of utilization of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I think it's the last one. We're encouraging people. We're going around. We're having, again, I'm having lots of conversations. I just spent 7 hours at Farmington on Wednesday, and I just get excited when it's about, it's not eliminating positions. I think, what I've seen in state government, in my experience and my experience at the university system is, we've continually kind of contracted, and we're to the point now where we just can't get any more lean. And so if we can use these kind of tools to free up, 30% of someone's time, so now they can focus on a higher priority, it's not about eliminating them, it's about refocusing them and getting them to be more customer focused or student focused or whatever it is in your particular area. So I'm really excited about the possibilities.
Mm-hmm. So what are some other thoughts around how the presentations today resonated with you, how they align with your vision for use cases in your jobs, and how they may make your operation more efficient? Dan, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jay, I saw you had your hand up first. I don't know if what you were going to say was covered.
Well, actually, I'll just touch on it very quickly. All I was going to say is, if our burning question for the public subgroup is, what areas would Maine government prioritize for a set of projects for AI technologies? And as Ryan was talking, the biggest thing that I see is not necessarily a particular project for technology, but the overall project of rolling out education as a whole to the state. So in other words, some of it might be through the community college, some may just be videos or other things, but I kind of liken this to back when personal computers were coming out and the internet. And so individuals and companies and towns and things that didn't educate themselves and avoided it ended up falling behind. And so if we want the intellectual capital of our entire state, that a prioritized project would be similar to what Ryan's doing with the university, but at a more state level.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Dan?
Yeah, what I was going to say is just more of an observation and interesting to me. Within the healthcare world that I sit in, we've started in our efforts around things that are not so much patient facing and even less so around the actual provision of care. And it's more sort of back office kinds of stuff. And I saw interesting parallels with all of the speakers today about how, the public sector is approaching things in similar ways where they're trying to enhance their own efficiency before they, expose the technology to their constituents. And eventually, and we saw this in New Jersey's examples, they very much are going that path. But I think to get a comfort level and a familiarity with the technology, I think it's helpful to first focus inwards on how one can make oneself be more efficient and use the tools. And then as you become better at them and more facile, you can start to have that outward face.
That strikes me as a kind of lead by example model, is making sure that we're up and paying attention and using these tools ourselves as we try and drive it through the organization. Appreciate that. Lisa Letourneau, how are you?
Hi, great. Thanks. So I think my comment really picks up on the last two, and I was going to say very much what Jay said, but it lines up with the last comment as well, which is we shouldn't be doing this all one department and one office at a time, right? My first thought was we could certainly learn a lot, maybe steal a lot from New Jersey. And then when Ryan talked about what he's doing within the university system, I thought, my God, we shouldn't each have to develop that, right? I mean, I know certainly my own commissioner, Galgie Holmes, is buried daily with issues, and I suspect every other commissioner in office is as well. So, just thinking ahead to eventual recommendations from this group, some kind of centralized leadership resources and compilation of resources for state employees, be that education, common tools, the New Jersey AI assistant. I mean, that's amazing, but we should not be doing this each ourselves over and over.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point, and it leads to another conversation channel, which is what are some of the challenges that we experience? And I think Commissioner Gagne Holmes mentioned, where do we sort of go when we need an AI solution? Is there a centralized department? How is that building out? Is this a department by department thing? And I think, Lisa, you're suggesting that would be probably an inefficient way to go. And then there's the other side, and Ryan mentioned this. How do you train people? How do you get people on board and start using the tools in which in its own way both builds productivity and in this environment, I think also helps make them better themselves. But
And
those are
Dan's point, then be able to feel confident offering it to others, right? So.
exactly. And you use the word confident. I think there is a confidence level thing as to how do I know this is right? Dan, you experience that in healthcare is, I can use an artificial tool like artificial intelligence, but I've got to make sure that the information I'm getting back here is right. And we're not quick to rely on the technology to do that. So, are there challenges that we see with trying to drive implementation? And what do we think about for state government, especially, or municipal governments, but for state government, the Ryan's model of let's get it out there, let's get people using the tools and have it grow itself? Or, are there target areas that we should really be paying attention to and trying to prioritize first? Phoenix, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Oh, my camera's still off.
There you go.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of how to prioritize. One thing I'm thinking about, I mean, the tools that we've seen and as mentioned, I think can reduce a lot of the worst parts of working in government in some ways, which is kind of the form checking and that kind of stuff that isn't particularly inspiring. I'm thinking though that, I mean, there was probably going to be more than one tool and resource required, and all of which from the state government perspective will require going through a procurement process. And that's true. It's going to be true at the municipal level as well. The procurement process itself, I guess I'll just say takes time and has a lot of factors going into it. And for that to be a bottleneck could slow down deployment of new tools across the rest of state government. So if there are ways that process itself could benefit from improvement from these new tools, then maybe that would make sense as a place to start to then kind of relieve that bottleneck as a place to improve elsewhere.
Yeah. So how do you identify the best partner to work with and make sure that that's both high quality and at a good price point? Ryan, you sort of oversee that procurement side. Have you had any experience in what Phoenix is talking about in terms of trying to access the technology so that you can deploy it, or are you taking things that are pretty much off the shelf, like?
Yeah, we're mostly off the shelf. I mean, we've decided that we're not looking for a one-size-fits-all solution. We don't think that that's in the best interest of the university, that everyone potentially has ChatGPT. What we've found is we've got a suite of tools that we have tested and then make available through procurement or through our IT department, and then folks can access those. They're not. Because we're doing it at that level, you don't put out an RFP for, Claude services, for instance, or ChatGPT services. You just put it on a P card or you work out a process. And so the way we've done that is, if Phoenix calls up the IT department and says, I want ChatGPT for the next year, we charge you the annual rate, so $300, and we pay that bill 12 times a year. You only get charged once. We've got a list of approved products that we've vetted. It's about 12 products, and anyone across the system can access those tools. Researchers can make special exceptions for, you know, an AI tool that's really for a really finite group of folks across the system. And we have a process for that as well.
Interesting. Nick, you've had a chance to talk to your CIO colleagues around the country. What are you hearing from them about what common themes as well as some of the common challenges?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of it, data is a big part of it, right? Having the amount of data that the state has and having that structured in a way that's going to provide a solid backdrop for whatever AI use case is being made is a big part of it. You know, outside of that, there's to what Ryan's talking about, right? There's the idea of just the commercial off-the-shelf products that you can grab, but then there's also the idea of, you know, these more design systems like New Jersey, and there's a real cost to putting a system like that together. So, you know, what I'm hearing a little bit about is, and we've touched on this a little bit in terms of the state and local cybersecurity grant, where the state has been collaborating with municipalities and cities and school districts in Maine to help bolster cybersecurity components within that group. Brian from MMA has been involved in that. But I'm starting to hear a little bit about that same idea in terms of these more built AI systems that provide a function, and how can we do that in a way that it's not just limited to one particular organization for use. Like there's the opportunity for reuse by other organizations so that cost is spread out. It's not, you know, it's not Commissioner Fortman has to bear the entire cost of the system. Others will use it, others will make use of it, and that cost is shared. Those are kind of a couple of things I'm starting to hear now.
Interesting. Actually, if Commissioner Fortman was willing to bear the cost for the community colleges, I'd be more than willing to have her bear the cost for the entire system.
And I was thinking it was something you wanted to pick up, Dave. So, but actually, since you mentioned one of my takeaways from this, which may be a little basic, is I think both Ryan and Rob talked about educating staff as kind of a first step. And I think that that's something that we can do, and having, I think Rob said he had nine modules or something, which seemed a little overwhelming, but looking at, is there basic training that can be made available to all state employees, seems like a really important first step, because we can't just unleash something when people don't even understand what the potential is. So that would be my recommendation.
No, absolutely. And I think working within our current channels, I think Ryan and I could come up with, you know, a model in which we could support that training and learning and education possibility. Sarah?
Thank you. I think the one thing I wanted to add, just thinking about the costs, and the example from the permit tool this morning, was they were also making really clear the benefits. And so one of the measurements that they had right up front was time saved. And so I think that's the other thing, that it will be really important to be communicating what the benefit of these investments are and how there's a return when you're using these tools to either improve efficiency or improve service. I just really liked that was sort of right up front on the display. So I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, so you're getting a metric that helps you understand why it's valuable. Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Does anyone here can you take from these conversations and identify maybe a pilot project that you can see working within your organization, or one that you might suggest that the state sort of embrace as a, you know, if we did this, we think we could make some real headway? And as Sarah has mentioned, you know, what are the metrics that we would want to be targeting? Is it time saved? Is it, you know, some other kind of metric that helps people understand how they're benefiting? Not everybody at once, you know.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand, so that's how technologically uninclined I am. But I would just say, I love the idea that New Jersey flagged about reviewing rule comments, right? Every department that has to do rulemaking, and every single comment received needs a response. And to the degree that we can ask AI to tell us what the major issues are, there's value there, I think, across state government.
Yeah, there is. There is. Other thoughts? We've talked a little bit about how we might get training and education and use cases out there. Nobody really jumped on the opportunity to say, you know, I think this is an area where the state might benefit. But so we can continue to think about that. Dan has put the questions that this subgroup is going to wrestle with up in the chat. If you take a minute to review those, we just always want to be sure that we're asking the right questions. And down at number 5, that one focuses really in on the risks. And are there things that we need to be, you know, sort of in the unintended consequences category? Are there risks that we need to make sure that we're attending to?
I mean, it's all the usual ones that we talk about with these tools, right? The inadvertent introduction of biases and access kinds of issues, exacerbating already longstanding discrepancies between people's availability to access technology and tools like this. So we don't want to make that even worse. Those are definitely 2.
How do you parse out unintentional biases? You know, you're building an AI bot with data. How do you first recognize it, and then how do you sort of train the tool to make to eliminate the bias?
Yeah, Dave, I'll be very honest. This is one of the things that I am still struggling with myself. Part of the challenge is knowing how your models are trained, right? And ensuring that the data that they're trained on is representative of the population or the use case that is going to be used for. But what if those data themselves are biased? What if you know, the zoning approvals or whatever the first demo that we had today, what if there was bias in how those things were approved in the first place? And all you're doing with AI is propagating those biases. It's really difficult. So I don't have a great answer. I think that the one thing that we're trying to do is just to go in with eyes open and to monitor. So as we implement these tools, to really look at what the outputs are like and look at what effect they're having in terms of decisions that are made, and ensuring that things don't trend in a different direction, perhaps, than what had been done up until then.
So a little bit of a combination of data analytics and just human vigilance to try and make sure that we're getting the product that we hope for.
Yeah.
Molly, I think I noticed you raise your hand, but I wasn't.
Yeah, no, apropos of the human vigilance piece, I really liked the New Jersey case example, because it does I mean, it raises a lot of questions about due process and, you know, making sure that if decisions are being made in after a hearing, you know, how just that there is that human review is so deeply critical, it seems to me. And so to make sure that what happened in the hearing is reflected accurately, and also to make sure that there aren't biases that are being introduced, and then just to make sure that that it's being articulated in a way that's understandable. So there's a lot of different layers to this, and I know it was very clear that there's a human review element that's baked right into this process. But I think that's an example of something that just sort of structurally feels like a really critical piece for us to keep an eye on. And the reality is, right now, a lot of the different services and programs that are available, you know, don't have any kind of stopgap measure to make sure that you have a review by a human. So that feels like a really important piece. The other thing I just wanted to raise, this question about actually a case use in the legislature is really interesting. Thinking about, especially, and lawyers are talking about this a lot too throughout the field, but how we could be bringing AI in to create more accurate information about, for example, pending legislation or existing rulemaking in other settings too, to help people just have accuracy. There's very little available staff time in the legislature. And so getting any kind of research done is really difficult. So that could be another interesting place to bring in.
So that goes back to the sort of, test or pilot projects.
Yeah.
In terms of, just so that I understand, as we kind of review this and begin to think about how we'd write the report, when you're talking about the people in that case, my sense is you're talking about legislators who are going to have to make a decision on legislation and making sure that they're well informed, as opposed to, in your case, the constituents who might want to be informed.
No, I think for the legislature itself,
Yeah.
getting accurate information can often be a challenge, and making sure that people have access, especially as the session is moving forward. And people often want to know information about what's happening in other states, and that can be difficult to gather in a timely way.
Got it. So, Sam, we've talked a little bit about the human overlay, and on a day-to-day basis, you're sort of double checking how human interaction is working out in the workplace. Do you have any thoughts on that AI integration with the human factor?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I've enjoyed the presentations a great deal today. I learned a lot about all the different ways that AI can be used to improve services. I think there's some really exciting stuff happening with that. I mean, obviously from a labor perspective, I always want to make sure that that's not going to mean that folks are pushed out of the workforce. And I think we need to be thoughtful about that. I recognize that a lot of these tools do have, the possibility of just making workers' lives better. But I also recognize that if you're making things more efficient, it could mean that, when you're looking at state budget cuts, then, it's also a place where, well, if we could use a different system to do this more quickly, that could mean cuts to jobs. So I think we just have to be thoughtful about how we review each of these technologies. Another thing that, I'm not sure if this is the place for it, but just thinking about that last question of risks, I'd be kind of curious to hear what folks are thinking in terms of some of the uses that we haven't talked as much about, like potential surveillance or uses like monitoring parking or monitoring speeding. Those are places where, AI has already been used in other municipalities, other states. Do we want that to come here? What parameters should we put in place to guide that if we do? I've already had some experiences with AI parking systems personally that were very frustrating, and I couldn't get through it. This is at a state system. Won't mention any names, but yeah, so it's just something that we should think about as we do this. Like what kind of parameters do we want to have about that kind of technology?
Yeah. I do think that a large aspect of what we have to discuss and wrestle with here is what are the guardrails and how do we build guardrails? And I think another thing that we have to think about and think through is as work changes, do we help people grow and their jobs will change, and as a way of sort of embracing the technology to help build a better, more efficient workplace and a society. So where are those balancing acts, and how does that come into play? As a different point of view of, just sort of deciding to invest in a chatbot and eliminate a human position. But, is there more of a migration and an opportunity to really upgrade the human skills at the same time? And Pender, you've not had a chance to say anything, and we've only got a couple minutes, but I just wanted to make sure if you had any thoughts on that or on any of the subjects that we've covered today.
No, I'm taking a lot of notes and I appreciate all of the information. I could share examples of projects, but I don't know how generalizable to the entire state they would be. For example, we've been modeling our school funding formula using AI, and that's been interesting, but I'm mostly listening today and grateful for all that I'm learning from everybody.
All right, excellent. And Chris, you've got a session coming right up, but I don't know if you've got anything that you want to add.
Thanks, Dave. No, well, I guess maybe I do. I think one way to think about this with respect to the public sector is similar to the way Ryan described it. You know, one recommendation we might make to the state and to the governor is to enable the resources that every department or division leader within state government might need to develop her own AI roadmap for the coming year, and to challenge everyone to be experimental and curious and look for ways similar to what Commissioner Macon just suggested, to start just experimenting with the tools. Maybe those tools are vetted by a group like Ryan's for the state. Maybe there's corresponding sort of, I think that's the model. I have kind of a counter view to one of our colleagues earlier who shared that maybe, you know, this sort of needs to be run out of a central office. I think, you know, planting 1,000 sort of seeds and seeing what innovation, one of the framing questions for this group is around innovation. I think we're going to get a lot further faster from an innovation perspective if we just encourage individuals at every level of every municipal organization in the state to build their own plan for personal sort of AI productivity or innovation for the coming year. And that might be I'm not sure how to translate that into an actionable recommendation, but if you tied it to a corresponding metric around productivity or customer satisfaction improvement, and typically what gets measured gets done, and then people will go to work on, you know, applying AI tools to improve, you know, whatever it is, processing time or satisfaction among members of the public that you interact with, or you know, et cetera. So I think being unafraid and really going for it is I guess the headline I'm trying to search for.
Yeah, and I'll wonder aloud whether it's a both and, whether those general use cases are built out and really planting 1,000 seeds like you suggest and Ryan is actually doing. And there are cases where we have sort of major data sets that need to be trained but can help produce a different kind of outcome that might not come from an existing resource like Gemini or something like that. So all things to consider. We're getting very near time here, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I do want to remind you that our next meeting is July 16th. So that doesn't feel all that far away. And the topic we're examining is this whole concept of emerging risks and harms that could come from AI. So from that, our last meeting, that's our last meeting before we go on a bit of a hiatus. And we come back and we have to start thinking about how we organize all these thoughts into a report. So I very much appreciate your participation. If our presenters are still on and listening in the background, excellent presentations today. They gave us a lot to think about, and that was clear from the conversation that we just had. So I'll probably see many of you in different journeys, but we'll all come together again on July 16th from 12 to 2. Fair enough? All right, great. Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.